Hey everybody, I'm Elizabeth McSwan from EMAC and Hedwig, and today's video is about 5 habits that can improve your wildlife photography. So here we go. So when you're out in the field and you're photographing, there's a lot that you have to think about at the same time. You have to think about aperture, shutter speed, ISO, making sure all of those settings are dialed in. You have to think about your autofocus mode and where your autofocus point is. You have to think about things like lighting and maybe sometimes wind, what the wind is doing, perspective, and composition. That's a lot to think about at the same time. This video isn't going to be about that. It's going to be about what you can do to help you get to that moment of capture. So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to be talking a lot about birds, but these tips can really be applied to any type of wildlife photography. So number one is to become an expert in whatever it is that you are interested in photographing. So if you're interested in photographing birds, become a birder. Pick up a field guide or two, read books, blogs, listen to podcasts, watch videos. There's so much to learn about birds, especially, that as much as you are going to be learning in the field when you have a subject in front of your lens, you can also learn so much outside of the field. And any information I think that you can learn is really, really helpful and can really elevate your photography. I really highly recommend getting a field guide or maybe a couple of field guides. And I know that people like using apps, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that necessarily, but I do think that using a field guide can really help you just gain more information. I think that being able to physically turn pages in a book, I think is really, really helpful. I do feel like I learn more when I have a book. When I was a kid, we had a bird book, a bird guide in our kitchen, and I would just constantly be flipping through that book. I just started to gradually over time be able to ID the birds in that book, or ID them out and about in my kind of everyday life because I had seen them in the book so many times, kind of going through just, looking at the pictures of the book. So I think that having field guides really has advantages that apps simply don't have. I think another thing that's really important to IDing birds is being able to see them from afar through binoculars. I think having a good pair of binoculars, they don't have to be super expensive, but having a good pair of binoculars can really help you just know what's around you, not what is in, a few feet in front of you. And I know that one could argue that it's like, well, if this bird isn't close to me, then I'm not interested in photographing it. But it's not just about the bird that's in front of your lens, it's about the bird that is in that particular environment and that habitat. And again, that information can be so helpful, maybe not in that moment, but in a moment down the road. Another thing that I think is really important to learn about birds is the bird calls. Bird calls are so crucial to understanding kinds of birds that are around you. It makes you just that much more aware of your environment. I have to say that I struggle with this. This is something that doesn't come naturally to me, and I have to hear a bird call like a bazillion times before I can actually ID it. But once I can, I'm glad I have it kind of in my in my repertoire, as it were, so that I can use that information down the line, especially if you're interested in shooting small birds, because you are often going to hear a bird before you see one, and it's just so helpful to know what's around you. When I first started, I would get really faked out by robins all the time, American robins, because they would perch close to me, and I would be walking along a trail or in a park or something, and I would hear this bird and it would sound really, really close to me, and I would spend all of this time trying to figure out where it was, because sometimes it can be hard to kind of hone in on where a call is coming from. And I would spend all this time and find it and be like, oh, well, that's a robin. Okay. Next. The other thing that I think is really good about learning about birds, kind of outside of the field experience, is that it makes me really excited to go back into the field and photograph them. Learning all this really cool stuff about them is like, oh yeah, I want to go, these birds are so cool, I want to go back out and photograph them. Another really great way to get information is by joining a birding club or by signing up for workshops and bird walks that are in your local area. Like I know Audubon does a lot of that kind of stuff if you have an Audubon chapter near you where you live. These birding walks can be really great for a few reasons. One, you can gain access to places that you might not normally get access to. And two, you also have access to a lot of really, really good experienced birders, and you can ask them questions about the types of birds that you're interested in photographing. They will likely have a lot of information and they'll probably share it with you. The birding community is pretty good in that respect. These birding walks are not necessarily a great place to photograph birds because the groups are often large and sometimes loud and just, it's not the best environment to get good photographs. I would still bring your camera just in case because you never know what you could find. But I would say go to these birding walks with no expectations except getting information. That's really what these birding walks can be used for and can be helpful for, is getting information so that you can go back on your own later and photograph by yourself. Number two is to get up early to photograph. And believe me, nobody wishes this wasn't true more than me. I am not a morning person. Every morning I get up early to photograph is a struggle, but it's always worth it. I think that having kind of morning sessions, integrating morning sessions and evening sessions is just a really great thing. And of course, you want to photograph in the morning and in the evening because of the beautiful, beautiful light that's around at that time of day. But the morning has its advantages over the evening. And one of them is that there are a lot less people out and about in the morning than there are in the evening. If you're shooting on public land, if you're shooting on a refuge or in a national park or someplace like that, in the evenings there's just going to be a ton more people out and about enjoying nature who could potentially and inadvertently scare away your subject, or in some cases be somebody else that also wants to photograph what you're photographing. And usually when there's a lot of people that are trying to photograph the same subject, you just don't get as good photographs. Another thing to think about is that, the light is of course different in different places at different times of day. So you might go to a refuge that's good in the evening, that's not necessarily good in the morning, or vice versa. Or there might be parts of a refuge that aren't good in the evening but are good in the morning, or vice versa. So mixing it up and having some morning sessions can really open up some locations to you that were previously not maybe available, or at least not on sunny mornings when you really want to have that beautiful, beautiful kind of low light situation. Lastly, there are some weather advantages that are better in the morning. You can get things like dew in the morning that you really can't get in the evening, or mist or fog, which usually burns off by mid-morning. And the other thing is that the world kind of renews itself over the course of the night. Everything seems fresher in the morning. As an example, if you want to go, say, to a beach and photograph on the beach during the summertime, if you go in the evening, the sand is going to be, all dimpled from hundreds or maybe even thousands of footprints over the course of a day. But the night settles in and the ocean breeze kind of comes through and smooths everything out, and you can get some really, really great kind of more environmental stuff that just looks a little bit more pristine. So number 3 is to have a plan. Usually when I go somewhere, when I go to a refuge or to a specific location, and I have an idea of what I want to shoot, I am generally more successful during those sessions than if I just, take my camera somewhere and walk around and see what I can find. Because you're not really committing as much to photography, right? You're trying to keep your options open, but in the process, what happens is that you're not committed somewhere, and oftentimes photography takes commitment. So knowing what you want to photograph, saying to yourself, okay, I want to photograph shorebirds. Okay, well, where should I photograph them? And kind of researching where to photograph them. Okay, well, where at this particular area is the light better, in the morning or in the evening? Keeping kind of an eye on the weather, getting there, getting into the sand, and really kind of being ready for whatever pops up can be really helpful. Even if you don't get shorebirds, maybe you get, maybe you get herons, or maybe you get something else that you weren't expecting. But because you had a plan and you followed through with it and you committed to a specific kind of photography or specific species, it just you have a much better chance of being successful. Which isn't to say that you're going to be successful every time you go out. It's important to have a plan B in case you just don't find any subjects to photograph or any subjects that you want to photograph. So being a little fluid in that planning can be very helpful, but having a plan in the beginning and really committing to it, I think, generally gives you a much better shot of getting great photography. Number four is to take care of anything human related before you go out to photograph. So making sure that you have something to eat, and better yet, bring snacks with you out into the field, that you have water, that you're not thirsty, that you've used the bathroom, that you have the appropriate clothing, making sure that you're nice and bundled up if it's really cold, or making sure that you have kind of airy, breathable clothing if it's warm, making sure you have sunscreen, bug spray, making sure that all of that stuff is taken care of and that you are as comfortable out in the field as possible. Because if you are uncomfortable for whatever reason, it can really make your photography session less fun and less successful as a result. I know there have been times where I've gone out and I think, I'm just going to take a quick look at this particular place, and I go out without a jacket, or not properly bundled, or maybe I forget to bring a snack, or I forget to bring some water, or I don't have bug spray and I'm getting eaten alive by bugs. These are all things that for me, I know will hinder my photography. They'll make me want to give up a lot sooner than if I had taken care of that stuff. It makes me want to go back to the car and just try again some other day, especially if I don't find anything to photograph. So it's really important, I think, to take care of all that stuff and just take care of yourself as a human so that you can concentrate completely on photography and not be distracted by any of that stuff. Number five is to know when to move on. There are going to be times when you are working with the subject and it's just not working. Whether it's because they just don't want to be photographed and you keep kind of pushing them away from you and they keep sort of maybe pushing down the path. Maybe it's because the light just isn't really that great and you don't have access to a position where you could get your subject in better light. Maybe it's because they're just a little too far away, or maybe it's because the wind is not blowing in the right direction and the bird, it just isn't facing you. Whatever it is, it's really important to know when a subject isn't working for you and you just have to move on and find something else. And this is something that can be really tough, especially in New England, because sometimes you'll go to a refuge and you just won't find a whole lot of things to photograph. It can be really tough to let one go. It feels so close. But if it's not working for you, if it's becoming a struggle to get good photographs, it might be time to let that particular bird or animal alone and find something else that doesn't mind getting its photograph taken, or that is just in a better position for you to get a better photograph. Number 6, guys, this is a bonus tip, is to think about your photography in the long term. There are going to be times when you go out and you don't find anything to photograph and it seems like a bust, and that can be really discouraging. But I would really encourage you to change your mindset into thinking, okay, well, I haven't seen anything really worth photographing at this refuge or at this place right now. But what can I observe about this location that can help me get photographs at this location at a later date? So things like owl pellets, maybe significant bird poop on branches or on the trunks of trees. Maybe was an owl roost at one time. Maybe the owl isn't there that particular day, but maybe coming back on another day and it might be there. Maybe you're in an area that has a really great habitat for warblers or for green herons or Virginia rails or ducks. There's just so much to observe and to think about, and this is where that knowledge, that sort of book learning, can come into play here, because you've done your homework. Okay, this is a good habitat for these birds. And to come back at different times of the year and to see what you can get at that particular location. This is something for me that is hard, and that I am really trying to make a conscious effort to do, to not get discouraged by, going to a particular place and not finding anything to photograph, because there's so much other things to see and to hear and to observe that can help get me photographs some other time at that particular place. And I think that it's really important, especially in the areas that are around you, that are close to you, where you maybe photograph a lot of the time, to really get to know it really as best you can, so that you can get great nature shots at other times of year, even if it isn't in the now. It can be a month from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, maybe even a couple of years. And the information that you gain from those nature walks, even if you don't get pictures, you can get information, and that can help you down the road in the long term, help you with your photography. Those are my habits for getting great wildlife photography. I hope they were helpful. If you like this video, you know what to do. Like, share, subscribe. We're new here on YouTube. We would love to have your support. You can also find us on Patreon. For as little as $2 a month, you can get early access to videos like this, as well as a bunch of other cool stuff. There's a link in the description below to our Patreon site. Until the next video, everybody, happy adventuring, happy shooting. See you later.